So overall, I think this is a great thing that they're bringing in as long as it's used properly and filled out properly. So overall, I think that this will be a good thing. I think that people should use this to make sure that they're not getting in bed with the wrong person. And generally, as I had mentioned before, being accountable is not being persecuted. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. This week, we're going to be going over the stats that happened through August, as well as some almost breaking news from July 31st, which may cause a little bit of a disturbance in the force, if you will. So without further ado, rents in the Greater Vancouver area have been softening for the past 3 months or so. That being said, the difference between last month and this month is $26 on average that it has dropped, and a startling $172 from last August to this August year over year. So that is a substantial drop in the rents. That being said, there are things that owners can do, and this is a little bit of uncharted territory for them. So the landlords that are currently dealing with this market, it used to be that you'd be able to just throw up a sign and get what you wanted for the rent. Those days are gone, so you are going to have to be open to some negotiation, much like I touched on last month, as well as, the better pictures, the stronger marketing. You may want to also include some incentives. Now, the reason why you want to include incentives over just rushing to the bottom of the barrel for your pricing is because the average rent increase for the past few years has been around 3%, 2.5 to 3%. So that being said, it will be very difficult if you drop your rent by a crazy amount to get back up to cash flow positive or even. Because of course, the mortgage rates are higher, the tax rates are higher, things are just generally more expensive. So before you go hitting your price, you may want to try offering some incentives to incoming tenants. A couple of options that you may want to consider would be things such as paying for the moving truck, paying for the move-in fee that most strata buildings charge you, as well as you may want to consider adding Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, possibly for a couple years, whatever works out that you can negotiate with your incoming tenant for. Now, under normal circumstances, I would not suggest to include utilities such as electricity, water, gas, etc. The reason for that is because they can fluctuate. So if it's a very cold winter, your electrical bill will be substantially higher than it is currently in August. So that is one of the things that you don't have very much control over, whereas Wi-Fi is generally fairly standard. So you can pay $50 for the internet over the next 2 years, and you know that that is going to be something that's part of your calculations year over year, and it won't fluctuate too much. So therefore, it might be something to offer as an incentive to attract the best tenants that you can. The other thing that has been going on is there has been a fair amount of motion with students still looking for places. September is coming up, so if you're around any of the campuses, UBC, SFU, Douglas College, these sorts of things, there are still students looking. So you will want to kind of adjust for that and see if you can catch that wave. Now, that being said, the campuses around UBC and SFU at Surrey Central has been very difficult to rent as of late because there is just the sheer number of places that are available. There's new buildings that have all started taking possession with the new anti-flipping laws, and there's just generally a lot of units there. They're all built around the same time, so this one is a very difficult place to rent right now. If you have a one-bedroom out there, I am sure that you're struggling with that right now because of just the sheer numbers. So therein lies that you may want to start offering some of these incentives before you start hacking down your prices from the get-go. Now, that being said, most of the units that are on the market right now are apartments, of course, and it's about a 50-50 split between one bedrooms and two bedrooms. There are some three bedrooms out there, but they're very small percentage. because there aren't that many of them out there to begin with that were built. Now, that being said, of course, the cheapest price per square foot is Langley at $2.41, Surrey at $2.59, and West Vancouver at $2.60. Most of the lower pricing for West Vancouver is due to the fact that there's generally not that many condos. Those are mostly basement suites and or houses, full houses, which dilutes the price per square foot simply for the fact that the basement suite generally rents for less money than a self-contained condo. So overall, the takeaway of this here is that the market is softening. So as landlords, you will have to adjust accordingly, negotiate, and be prepared to offer some incentives so that you can find yourself a great tenant and in the shortest time possible, because there is so much out there to select from, along with the changes that have happened, such as immigration. And people are generally just staying still right now due to the tariff threats. They're concerned about whether their job will still be around. And generally, things are just getting more expensive. So therefore, people are taking less risk and just staying with what they know and staying put. So overall, make sure that you negotiate and make sure that you are ready to give out some incentives to attract the best tenant that you can. Now, I had mentioned at the start of the show that there's going to be some new rules that have come out that may trigger a few people. So let's get into that. As of July 31st, the government has now said that they are going to post what happens with the monetary orders. Now, monetary order is when it goes through the RTB and it is discovered and the case is ended that someone owes someone else, whether it be landlord owes tenant or tenant owes landlord. Now, before this was completely anonymous. So nobody really knew who was paying what or where and how that all went down. However, now they are going to be having a searchable database that will have both the landlord's name, the tenant's name, the address, and the case number, along with how much is owed and who owes it. So this is going to ruffle a few feathers. Now, as I work in this industry and I see both sides of the coin, I can see plus and minus to these rules. We've heard some complaints from tenancy advocacy groups going on about the fact that they feel that if a tenant exercises their right to file a monetary order to a landlord, that they'll just be viewed as troublemakers and it will reduce the people who want to rent to them. That's a lot to unpack there, simply for the fact that any landlord who is actually serious and professional about renting out their unit will likely look at these monetary orders, use the case number, and then figure out what the case was about. Now, if a tenant has filed a monetary order for something that makes sense, such as a landlord not giving back their damage deposit or not fixing their fridge after 2 months, this is a logical thing, and any landlord who is on side will not have a problem with that, along with any property manager, of course. On the second complaint that we've seen from a lot of the tenant advocacy groups is that they feel that if a tenant is receiving a lot of monetary orders, that people won't want to rent to them because they're receiving all these monetary orders. Well, yeah, that's the point. If you are being a bad tenant and you're busting up the place and not paying your rent and doing all these sorts of things that warrant getting a monetary order held against you, no, people should not be renting to you. You need to fix what you're doing and then find a place. See, unfortunately, being held accountable is not persecution. So yes, if somebody is getting a heap of monetary orders against them, then no, people should avoid renting to them. I absolutely agree with that. That's accountability. Now, on the flip side of this, of course, the tenants can also use this to the landlord, which is great. This here will keep landlords on side. If you are looking to rent a place, I would go search in this database for the landlord and the address and make sure that they're not doling out monetary orders every second tenant or every tenant, because that will give you the indication that this person is obviously going to try to pull something and keep your money. They're going to try to keep your damage deposit. They're going to make up things. So this too will weed out the bad landlords as well. So Overall, I think this is a great thing that they're bringing in, as long as it's used properly and filled out properly. So overall, I think that this will be a good thing. I think that people should use this to make sure that they're not getting in bed with the wrong person. And generally, as I had mentioned before, being accountable is not being persecuted. So we'll see how this develops over the next few months. It just started on July 31st. They're not posting anything previous to, but we'll see how this all goes down. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write it in the description below. And you can check out the link for this new rule change. I'll have that link in the description below as well. My name's Hayes. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.